Hello, this is Pastor Patrick Hines here at Myrtle Heights Presbyterian Church, and I'm going to press on in one of the 7 series, actually there's 6, series I've been doing on YouTube, and I want to pick up the next section of Thomas Boston's really good book, The Crook and the Lot, and this is especially relevant with myself lately because my family's been going through some very difficult things related to health problems. So this is especially relevant for me and mine at this time. So without any ado and introduction, I'm going to get right to it here and try to be efficient with time. Where the crook falls. And we looked last time at the 4 kind of like attributes of crooks in the lot. They are disagreeable, they're unsightly, they're ugly, they're unfit for motion, they slow us down, they make getting things done and doing things hard. And they entangle us. They tie us up and make it hard to do anything. Where the crook falls, where do these crooks happen in our lives? Like what part of our lives? Our lives obviously encompass a lot of different things. We have people that we love. If we're married, obviously that's a huge part of our lot in life. We have children. We have our health, finances, all those kinds of things. And the crooks in the lot fall in all of them. So let's talk about this here this time, and this is where Boston is going. Where the crook falls, and this is where we are right here. I'm going to turn that bookmark off. Okay. Having reviewed the nature of the crook in the lot, let us now observe what part of the lot it falls in. 3 conclusions may be established here. First, it may fall in any part of our lot, and no part is exempted. I can just break from the quotation here. There's always been things that, like, I can handle certain crooks in the lot, and I can get through certain things. There's certain things, though, that to me have almost been like, God, you're not allowed to touch those things. Like children and their health and their lives and that kind of stuff. But God very often allows us to get hit where it really hurts us the most. And that's by His design because He loves us and because He's trying to train us to pray harder and to be more faithful to Him and to hate sin more than we do. So let's talk about this here. No part is exempted. Because sin is found in every part, the crook may take place anywhere. Being all like one who is unclean, we all fade like a leaf. Isaiah 64:6. The main stream of sin, which the crook readily follows, runs in very different channels in the case of different persons. And due to our various temperaments, a condition that proves a sinking weight to one, another goes very lightly under. Second, the crook may fall simultaneously in many parts of the lot. The Lord calling on one solemn day, terrors on every side, Lamentations 2:22. Sometimes God makes one notable crook in our lot, but its name could be called Gad, being the forerunner of a coming troop. Then the crooks are multiplied so that we are made to halt on each side. While one stream is running full against us from one quarter, another is let in on us from another quarter until the waters finally break in on all sides. And I know everyone that's listening to this can probably, if you've walked with Christ for a while, you can identify with that. So there's times that it feels like an avalanche is going on, and that there's so many things that are distressing you and hurting you from so many different angles and so many different quarters of your life that it can really feel overwhelming. It really can. But what we have to remember, and I actually did a devotion with all my children that are still living at home. My oldest is married now, but the ones that were awake, the baby was in bed already. But the rest of them were there in my house, and we've talked about my one child that has developed very serious health concerns, and really tried to emphasize to them what I need to emphasize to myself, that God is in control of and sovereign over, and His decree has ordered every single part of this, including every tear that's come out of my face and all of the heartache and sleeplessness and stomach aches and everything else that we have experienced because of it is all designed by God to make us better and to make us more fruitful in our callings. And as hard as it is, I know that there are certain things that could happen that would really, really test me and really test my resolve to keep saying that I trust God. But He has a way of doing that to us, of making us really uncomfortable. And so some people, it seems that they don't seem to suffer a whole lot, and others seem to suffer almost endlessly. And we have to trust that God knows why, and God has a plan for why for each person. Okay. Third, it often falls in the tender part, which is that part of the lot where we are least able to bear it, or at least we think so. For it is not an enemy who taunts me, then I could bear it. It is not an adversary who deals insolently with me, then I could hide from him. But it is a young man, my equal, my companion, my familiar friend. Psalm 55, 12, and 13. There, that's Jesus talking about Judas. If there is any one part of your lot that you are most inclined to rest in, the thorn will readily be laid there, especially because you belong to God. Actually, I have read this part, but this is really good. We'll read this little section again. If there's any one part of your lot that you're most inclined to rest in, the thorn will readily be laid there, especially because you belong to God. And this is one part I emphasized last time. God is jealous for our affection. He is jealous for our love, and He doesn't want us to give that love to things in this world and to things in our lot that He's blessed us with. When those things become the inordinate objects of our affection, then very often a thorn will be laid in them to make it impossible for us to find our sense of peace and meaning and comfort and self-definition from those things. In that thing where you are least able to be touched, you will be sure to be pressed. This will be the location of the trial, because it is the grand competition with Christ. I did read this last time. I take from them their stronghold, their joy and glory, the delight of their eyes and their soul's desire. Ezekiel 24:25. Yeah, God will take away from us the stronghold, the thing that we trust in, the thing that we turn to get us through things. That's something that's not Him. He takes away our joy. He takes away what we glory in. He takes away the delight of our eyes. He takes away our soul's desire. Why does He do that? Why does He do that? Because He wants us to love Him. Since the crook in the lot is the special trial appointed for each of us, it is very reasonable of God in His wisdom that it falls on the one thing that most rivals Him. And it's important for us to remember that. God is supposed to be number one in our hearts. He never fully will be until we're in heaven, but nevertheless, that's our goal, and God, in His plan and decree, will teach us to do that more and more. One individual that always comes to mind whenever I suffer is John Owen, because I don't know a whole lot about his personal life except that he outlived all of his children. He had 11 children, and I think 10 of them, as I understand it, died before their third birthday. And he had one daughter that made it to age 19. She got married, and her husband left her, and then she died of consumption when she was 19 while living at home. And yet, during all these years where he's having children and they're dying and he's burying them, he's writing these incredible books on communion with God, and writing these amazing treatises on theology, and is obviously very devout and has a deep, deep, deep love for God. And that, I think, one of the reasons he was so useful is because of how much he suffered, and how it's hard for me to imagine how hard it would be to live that way and to suffer in that way. But God does that. He'll take away the thing that most rivals Him in terms of our affection and our devotion. Okay, but more particularly, the crook is seen to fall in these four parts of the lot. Number one, the natural part. This affects our bodies, which were allotted to us by the great God who formed all things. The parents of mankind, Adam and Eve, were formed entirely sound, without the least blemish in soul or body. But in their posterity, there often appears a notable variation from the original design. Yeah, to say the least. Natural and accidental bodily defects, superfluities, deformities, and infirmities make the crook in the lot of many, having something unsightly or grievous about them. Crooks of this kind, more or less observable, are very common and ordinary, and the best are not exempted from them. It is purely owing to sovereign pleasure that they are not more numerous. Weak eyes made the crook in the lot of Leah. Rachel's beauty was contrasted with her barrenness. Rachel had some blessings and some crooks in her lot. Rachel was very beautiful, but she couldn't have children. Leah was not as beautiful as her sister, but she was obviously had an open womb and had 6 sons. Paul, the great apostle to the Gentiles, was apparently not an impressive or outwardly attractive man, for which fools were apt to condemn him. Timothy had a weak and sickly constitution, and yet there is even a greater crook in the lot of the lame, the blind, the deaf, and the mentally disabled. Some are weak to a degree in their intellect, but it is the crook of other bright souls to be overcast with clouds, notably overcast and darkened from the ailing bodies they are lodged in. Grave, wise, and patient Job is the eminent example of this, who said, I go about darkened, but not by the sun. I stand up in the assembly and cry for help. Some people are extraordinarily intelligent, and yet they're sad and down and depressed all the time, and have a very dark disposition. There's a book I just started reading called "Darkness Is My Only Companion," and it's about mental illness. And it's a very hard book to read. It's very painful stuff, because some people, your mind is in a lot of ways just like your eyes, your ears, your elbows, your hips, your shoulders, and other parts of your body that get injured, that get hurt, and a lot of times the mind just doesn't work right. It doesn't perceive reality the way that it's supposed to. And that is a terrible thing. It's a terrible crook in the lot. Not to be able to have control over what you think about, what you focus on, and having to do a lot of hard work to kind of get your mind to try to work semi-normal. And that's very, very hard. It's a very hard crook in the lot. Second, the honorary part. There is an honor due to all men, the small as well as the great, 1 Peter 2:17. This is grounded on the original design of human nature, being created in the image of God. But in the sovereign disposal of holy providence, the crook in the lot of some falls here. They are neglected and slighted. Their credit is kept low. They go through the world under a cloud, and being given a bad name, their reputation sinks. This sometimes is a natural consequence of their own foolish and sinful conduct, as in the case of Dinah, who brought a lasting stain on her honor by gallivanting about to satisfy her youthful curiosity without waiting for a providential call. Remember the story of Dinah? She goes out and meets, I think it's Shechem, the prince of Shechem, and then ends up, he lies with her, and then Simeon and Levi schemed, you can have our sister, all of you be circumcised first. So 3 days later, when they're as sore as possible, they go in there with swords and kill every man in the whole city. But anyway, Dinah shouldn't have gone out there to hang out with the pagans of the land. But where the Lord intends a crook of dishonor in our lot, innocence will not afford protection against it in an ill-natured world. Neither will true merit be able to make headway against it, or to make our lot straight in that part. David relates his experience of dishonor when he laments in Psalm 31:11, because of all my adversaries I have become a reproach, especially to my neighbors, and an object of dread to my acquaintances. Those who see me in the street flee from me. So a person's character can have a crook in the lot for something that they've done, that kind of thing. 3, the vocational part. Whatever a man's calling or station is in the world, be it sacred or civil, the crook in his lot may take its place there. Isaiah was an eminent prophet, but mostly unsuccessful. Jeremiah met with such a sequence of discouragements and mistreatments in the exercise of his sacred calling that he was close to giving up, saying, I will not mention him or speak any more in his name. Jeremiah 20, verse 9. I know how he feels. There's times that you work so hard, you study and pray and you work hard, and people don't like your preaching. They don't like what you have to say. The psalmist observes that a crook is often made in the lot of some men despite their industrious efforts in their civil business. They work their fields and vineyards, and God sometimes blesses their produce and livestock, but at other times they are diminished and brought low. Psalm 107:39. This was the pattern of the crook in Job's lot after he had prospered for many years. Some manage their responsibilities with all care and diligence. The farmer carefully works his fields, the shepherd knows the condition of his flocks and gives attention to his herds. The businessman arrives early and leaves late. The merchant diligently watches and pursues the most profitable and promising opportunities. But if there is a crook in that part of their lot, there is nothing they can do to straighten it. But why? The most appropriate methods used to reach our goals are insignificant without a word of divine appointment commanding their success. Lamentations 3:37, who has spoken and it came to pass unless the Lord has commanded it? People conduct their business with skill and industry, but the wind turns in their face. Providence disrupts their enterprises, unsettles their measures, frustrates their hopes and expectations, renders their endeavors unsuccessful, and so keeps them in ongoing, trying circumstances. So, the race is not to the swift, nor the battle to the strong, nor bread to the wise, Ecclesiastes 9:11. Providence interrupts and crooks the measures which human wisdom and effort lay down. So, the swift loses the race, the strong the battle, and the wise the bread. In the meantime, one or more providential actions can supply what is lacking in human wisdom, conduct, and ability. In this case, the slow wins the race and takes the prize. The weak wins the battle and becomes rich with the spoil, and bread falls into the lap of the fool. Okay, so that's the third part, the vocational part. Next part is the relational part, so our relationships with other human beings. Relations are the joints of society, and our most acute pain is often felt when the crook takes place there. Dysfunctionality, animosity between human beings can be a real crook in the lot. Human beings can be a real crook in our lot. They are designed to be the springs of our comfort, but they often turn into the greatest bitterness. Sometimes this crook is caused by the loss of a loved one. A crook was made in Jacob's lot when his beloved wife Rachel died, followed by the loss of his darling son Joseph. He thought he would go to his grave mourning, Genesis 37:35. He thought he was going to die from being grief-stricken. In the same way, Job laments, "He has made desolate all my company," Job 16:7, meaning his dear children, whom he laid in the grave without a single surviving son or daughter. At other times, this crook is made when the hand of God lies heavy on our family, which by virtue of the relationship recoils on us. This was deeply expressed by the believing woman in Matthew's Gospel when she said, "Have mercy on me, O Lord, Son of David. My daughter is severely oppressed." Ephraim felt the pain of a course of afflictions when he called his son's name Beriah because disaster had befallen his house, 1 Chronicles 7:23. Because all is not only vanity, but also vexation of spirit. It follows that the more we have these springs of comfort given to us, the more we must, at one time or another, find that we have more sources of sorrow to gush out and spring upon us. The sorrow is proportioned to the comfort found in them or expected from them. Lastly, this crook sometimes takes the form of a loved one who proves to be difficult through the disagreeableness of their temper, disposition, or actions. Well, that's an understatement. Okay, the crook in relationships is often someone that you love dearly who proves to be difficult through the disagreeableness of their temper, their attitude, their disposition, or their actions. This was another crook in Job's lot by means of his undutiful, ill-natured wife. Similarly, Abigail had a surly, ill-tempered husband, Nabal. Eli's children were perverse and obstinate. Jonathan had to deal with the furious temper of his father. So we often find that our greatest cross occurs in the place where we expected the greatest comfort. And that's the most painful. I'll say, as a father of 10, nothing's caused me more heartache than that kind of stuff with my children. Nothing has broken my heart more than the difficulties we've had primarily with their health, with health issues with them. My children have been very good towards us for the most part. We haven't really experienced, rebellion and that kind of thing. We've been blessed in that way, but health issues are really hard. And we have had some disagreeableness of temper, disposition, that kind of thing. Sin has unhinged the whole creation and made every relation susceptible to the crook. In the home, there are hard and unjust masters, as well as contrary and unfaithful servants. In a neighborhood, there are selfish and uneasy men. In the church, there are unedifying ministers who are offensive in their walk, and there are tempestuous and disorderly congregations who are a burden to the spirits of ministers. Let me read that sentence again. In the church, there are unedifying ministers who are offensive in their walk, and there are tempestuous and disorderly congregations who are a burden to the spirits of ministers. In the government, there are oppressive magistrates and opponents of good, and there are turbulent and seditious citizens. All of these cause crooks in the lot of our relationships. So we have now seen the characteristics of the crook itself. Okay, so now chapter 3, the crook ordained. Okay, so this is the part where we emphasize that it is the work of God, it says in Ecclesiastes 7:13. Consider the work of God, for who can make straight what he has made crooked? Having seen the crook itself, we will next consider God's making of it. We will see, number 1, that it is of God's making. 2, how it is of his making. And 3, why he makes it. God ordains the crook in the lot. The crook in the lot, whatever it is of God's making, which is seen in the following 3 considerations. First, It cannot be questioned that the crook in the lot, considered as a crook, is a disciplinary affliction no matter what the cause. Okay, you can't question that. You can't question that. Whether the thing in itself, its immediate cause and occasion is sinful or not, it is certainly a punishment or affliction. Now, it may be holily and justly brought on us by our sovereign Lord and Judge, so he expressly claims the doing or making of it as he did in Amos 3:6. Does disaster come to a city unless the Lord has done it? Therefore, since there can be no disciplinary afflictions except by God's making, and the crook in the lot is such an affliction, it is necessarily concluded to be of God's making. Second, it is evident from the biblical doctrine of divine providence that God brings about every man's lot and all of its parts. He sits at the helm of human affairs and turns them about wherever he wills. Grief. Whatever the Lord pleases, he does, in heaven and on earth, in the seas and all deeps. There is not anything that happens to us without his overruling hand. The same providence that brought us out of the womb brings us to and fixes us in the condition and place allotted for us, having determined allotted periods and the boundaries of our dwelling place. Providence oversees the smallest and most casual things about us, such as one of our hairs falling on the ground or the casting of lots. Even the free acts of our will that we choose for ourselves are directed by providence. The king's heart is a stream of water in the hand of the Lord. He turns it wherever he will. Proverbs 21:1. This includes the steps we take and those that others take in reference to us, for it is not in man who walks to direct his steps. Jeremiah 10:23. And this is true even when the steps causing the crook are deliberate and sinful, such as Joseph's brothers selling him into Egypt. It is also true when the actions are unintentional, such as accidental manslaughter from the slip of an axe head. For there is a holy and wise providence that governs the sinful and reckless actions of men, like the rider of a lame horse whose halting is caused not by his choice, but by the lameness of the horse as the true and proper cause. This is the reason that God is said to have sent Joseph into Egypt, and to have delivered a man into his neighbor's hand. Okay? So let's see what the footnote is here. That's probably, yeah. Joseph told his brothers it was God who had sent him to Egypt to save his family. This was true despite his brothers' sinful motivations and actions. They weren't thinking about saving their family from famine, but God in his sovereign providence ordered so that their evil desires would carry out his good plan and his good intention toward Joseph and his brothers, the very ones that were sinning, and the rest of the nation of Israel. Okay, lastly, God has by an eternal decree, as unmovable as mountains of bronze, appointed the whole of our lot, both the crooked parts as well as the straight. The same eternal decree that formed the high mountains and the low valleys has formed the heights and depths, the prosperity and adversity in the lot of the inhabitants of the earth, and they are brought about in time to a perfect alignment with God's will. The mystery of providence in the government of the world is that in all its parts it is the building constructed by God in exact conformity to the plan of his decree, who works all things according to the counsel of his will. Ephesians 1:11. So there is never a crook in our lot that cannot be compared to his original plan. Here, Job piously sets us an example in his own case. He is unchangeable, and who can turn him back? What he desires, that he does, for he will complete what he appoints for me, and many such things are in his mind. Now, as much as I have suffered as things that are pretty hard, pretty difficult, I haven't suffered anything like what Job has. What Job dealt with in his life in terms of the comprehensive nature of the losses that he endured, where all 10 of his children died in a day, he lost all of his possessions, everything he owned. His reputation was shot because people assumed he must have done something to make God angry. And then he lost his health as well. He's covered with boils and just looks terrible. You couldn't help but look at Job and wonder, what did he do to deserve this? Now, obviously we don't deserve anything good from God. None of us do. And yet God does us good so often, and we're so used to him being so gracious and so kind to us, that we take for granted the fact that we have food to eat every day, and that we have a warm place to sleep at night. It's starting to get cold here at night, and it's very nice to have blankets that are warm, and to have peace and quiet, and to not have marauding hordes coming over the hills to burn and pillage my house and take all my things. God blesses us with so many things, and yet we also have these things that are very hard on us. Things with regard to marriage, things with regard to family, possessions, health, your own reputation, sins that you've committed against people that people will hold against you indefinitely, it seems. So there's all these crooks in the lot, but they're all, in the final analysis, they are the work of the sovereign God for his own glory and for the good of his people. And as much as it is a hard pill to swallow at times, to think that God has determined every bit of sleeplessness and all of the sadness that we endure and the sense of loss that we endure and a lot of times the sense of regret that we have over sin that we've committed in the past. A lot of us have things about our own personalities, the way that we come across, that we despise, and we feel powerless to change it. We feel like, the way we are is so dissatisfactory to us at times. All those things are designed by God to do one thing, and that is to turn us more in our affection to him and to find our satisfaction in him and to find our joy and the meaning of our existence in God. And that's why the scripture says things that seem so inexplicable to us, like Romans chapter 5. Therefore we also glory in tribulations, knowing that tribulation produces character, and character hope, and so on, perseverance, patience, all of that. James 1 verse 2 and following, consider it pure joy when you fall into trials of various kinds, knowing that the testing of your faith produces patience, and so forth. So many passages like that explain to us that it's the hard parts of our lot that are really the places where we will grow the most. We are so prone to make an idol out of every blessing God gives us, that it's for our good that those things are often taken away from us in ways that are unimaginably difficult at times. I know people who have lost children, grown children, through accidents and all kinds of things, and people who have experienced just terrible suffering, just terrible suffering on a horizontal level with family relationships and with illness and disease. There's a lady that died years ago in Ohio, and she was a new Christian, and she had gotten cancer, and she was probably 15, 20 years older than me, and I used to go see her, and she had cancer in her face, and it had come back over and over and over again. They had to remove part of her tongue, and it was just again and again I just would be on the phone talking and just cry with her. And she would ask me, did I do something? Is God, is he exacting vengeance and things like that? And it just was heartbreaking to me. It was absolutely heartbreaking to hear her. And it just saddened me so much to see how much she suffered. And that made me feel very guilty for all the things that I've complained about and have felt like I've suffered so much for. I've never had a terminal disease like that that just refused to go away. It just kept coming back again and again. Until it finally took her life. And the things that she experienced were just heartbreaking to me. And you kind of think, why? Some people, it just seems like that's all they do. They just suffer and suffer and suffer. And yet, it's supposed to be in the church, in the body of Christ, that you have friends. It's not a competition. It's not whose children look the best, act the best, are the godliest, or the most successful. The measure of a husband or a wife, of a father or a mother, of a Christian person, is their love for God and their love for neighbor and the depth of their faith in Jesus Christ. Regardless of what God has planned for them to endure, and we all endure a lot of very hard things, those things are always the work of God. Ecclesiastes 7:13. Consider the work of God, for who can make straight what he has made crooked. So the crooks in your lot, those are always the greatest opportunities to grow. And they're actually the greatest opportunities for you to grow in joy and happiness. Because joy and happiness that's rooted in the promises of God of salvation and in the glory of who he is and his character, and the fact that Jesus Christ's righteousness is imputed to our account before God, and his cross is accepted as the full payment of our sins, and we're justified by faith alone, in Christ alone, because faith lays hold of the righteousness of Christ, which is the only righteousness that can meet the requirement of God. Then we know we have a loving God who is favorable towards us, perfectly so, because our salvation does not depend upon our covenant faithfulness or anything like that, but it's in Christ Jesus alone. And then, and only then, do we have a sense of what our life is really all about. And it's for the glory of God. We are trophies of grace. My life is not about working to create an ideal environment where I can't get touched and I can't get hurt anymore by anything in life. God's going to continue to remove things from me and strike me and hurt me because He loves me. He loves me. A life with no troubles, no trials is a life where spiritually, you become overweight and lazy if you have no trials, if you have nothing that breaks your heart. You won't pray as hard. I mean, it's sad to me. It takes these trials that just rip my heart out of my chest to make me pray and to make me really seek after God with more gusto. And, you know, God does these things for us, and they're the work of God, and we need to always remember that. Well, I'm going to go ahead and put a bookmark on here, so how God makes the crook in the law is where we'll pick up next time on this series. Thank you for watching or for listening. This is Pastor Patrick Hines of Bridwell Heights Presbyterian Church, and you've been listening to the Pulpit Supplemental Podcast. You can find us on the web at www.bridwellheightspca.org. Our sermons are streamed through Sermon Audio, and you can listen to that on the iTunes podcast version of Bridwell Heights Presbyterian Church. Feel free to join us any Sunday morning for worship at 11 a.m. sharp at 108 Bridwell Heights Road in Kingsport, Tennessee. And may the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make His face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. The Lord lift up His countenance upon you and give you peace.